So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this installment of the Staying Safe on Our Streets virtual workshop series. My name is Brooke Oliveri. I am the manager of the Long Island Health Collaborative, and we are working with the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety to bring you the Walk Safe Long Island initiative, much of which is educational programming like what you are attending this evening. Just a little bit more about the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety and the Long Island Health Collaborative as individual organizations. As you can see, the Walk Safe Long Island initiative is produced for the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety thanks to a grant from the New York State Governor's Traffic Safety. And so before we hear from our panelists, let's meet them. First up is Cynthia Brown. She is the Executive Director of the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety.
Good evening.
Also on the panel is Mark Hofacker, Program Director and Child Safety Car Seat Technician at NYCTS.
Hi.
The Coalition. Also on the panel is Lowell Wolf, Program Director for NYCTS as well as Associate Professor at Farmingdale State College.
Good evening.
And we're also joined by Lynn Margaret Brown, Program Coordinator, Educator, Social Media, Web Manager for New York Coalition for Transportation Safety.
Hello.
And now I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
All right. One of the reasons that we're really here tonight, it says, why do we need a public workshop on pedestrian and bicycle safety? I think you'll see from the items listed below that pedestrian safety, especially in the time of COVID, has become a real issue. We have been visiting police departments and police precincts throughout Nassau County, and for the year 2020, the numbers of pedestrians struck and bicyclists struck is much higher than it was last year. And that's partly due to speeding vehicles, and it's due to drugs and alcohol, and with the advent of marijuana, it might actually be legalized, and it is legalized, I'm sorry. And that might increase deaths even more because it's very difficult it's impossible actually to measure how affected a person is by marijuana and their ability to drive. Okay, next. All right, one of the things that we're really promoting is New York State laws, and it's on our website and it's on the Walk Safe website. And part of knowing the law is that you know what your rights are if you feel threatened, or if you see someone or observe someone who's been struck by a vehicle. Hopefully it won't be anybody watching this. You need to learn what the hindrances there are that would keep you from safely crossing a road. There are also many enhancements that make it safer and easier for you to cross a road. Engineers and other Nassau County and Suffolk County roadway planners are always trying to increase safe street crossings for pedestrians by redesigning roadways, and sometimes with a program called Complete Streets. And also, we're going to introduce you a little to these new micromobility devices like scooters and e-bikes, because eventually they're going to impact your ability to safely cross the street, because they're going to be in bike lanes or on the sidewalk or in other parts of the roadway, and they go much faster than normal bicycles do. Next. This is just a partial look at the number of hit and runs and car crashes involving pedestrians that have really been making headlines lately. And you can see this only goes from January 13th till February 21st. And there are 5 people here who have been hit and killed by a hit and run driver, including Nicki Minaj's dad. There was another one of a poor man on the side of the road who was helping a driver of a disabled vehicle, and the mom who was pushing her children in a stroller and who was killed in Amagansett. So these are, really take a toll on people and their families. And so we really are trying to keep you safer by advising you of this. Next. All right, pedestrian deaths, as I noted before, on the state as a whole have really been rising. There's one pedestrian struck by a motorist every 33 minutes in the United States, and almost 162,000 people killed or injured. That's between 2010 and 2019. And when this past year's numbers get added to it, it's going to be a lot worse. Nassau and Suffolk County have among the highest pedestrian rates in the state. I believe they're second only to New York City. And New York City has a lot of pedestrian and bicycle fatalities, but way less motor vehicle fatalities than the counties do. Next. All right, these are just some of the laws that are part of the New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law, and they were passed and intended to protect the pedestrian. But if you're going to be protected, you should be crossing at a location on the street where you are intended to cross, which would be at marked crosswalks or intersections. The crosswalk doesn't have to have a signal, but as long as it's marked, it's intended for the use of the pedestrian to cross. Motorists have rights at other locations other than intersections and marked crosswalks. So you must be very careful. That's why crossing a mid-block or where there's not good visibility is not a good idea. There are walk, don't walk signs that appear all over both counties that are intended to give you an idea of how long it'll take you to cross the street and where you should cross the street. If there is a sidewalk, you should always walk on it. You should always walk facing traffic if there is no sidewalk. Pedestrians have the right of way when a car is pulling in or out of traffic across the sidewalk. And I might particularly mention here driveways. And so there are not as many sidewalks out in Suffolk, but there are loads of driveways. And the driver is supposed to make sure that he has clear back out ability before pulling out into the highway. One of the things that you should always do in a situation like this, or especially even in a parking lot, you would be surprised how many people we have discovered have been knocked down or killed in parking lots. So that's another time you should try to make eye contact with the driver so that many people walking in a parking lot just assume the driver of the vehicle sees them, and that's just not true. Even with backup cameras, your peripheral vision doesn't always kick in. And pedestrians are not allowed on limited access roads such as expressways and interstates, and they are not allowed on entrance or exit ramps for those roads. Although, as you saw earlier, sometimes a car breaks down and that puts the pedestrian at risk. So you might consider carrying flares or whatever in the trunk of your car so that you're more visible if you have to pull over to the side of the road. But in any case, you shouldn't be walking in a highway like that. Next. All right.
Here, I'll take it here. This is Mark. Here's a picture of your library. I used to live in that area, so I remember when it wasn't a library. If you go to the next slide, it's a very nice library. I put two pictures here. One is just on the right. It's infrastructure, for cyclists. It's a pretty small bike rack. It'd be nice to see a larger bike rack. It's off to the side a little bit on the left side of the library. Put a picture on the left just to show Woodfield Road. Now that's a very busy road. You've got buses, you've got cars, you've got long stretches between the lights. So the cars can speed a lot. You've got a park there, the tennis courts. This road, it's, I thought make a point. If you look at it, we'll talk a little bit later, theoretically an adult, you're riding your bike, you should be out in the street, but there's hardly any shoulder there, to ride on. But you'd stay, you could go on the sidewalk for safety purposes, but if you're on the road, you drive to the right, but you don't have much of a shoulder. There's no bike lane. But at the same time, Cindy's a big proponent of this, is you plan your trip. So if I was going, this is a north-south road, parallel to this is Ocean Avenue. And that I think I'd rather ride on Woodfield than Ocean because of all the parked cars. There's a lot more cars there. It's a lot busier. So, just to make that point, think of what infrastructure you have or lack of infrastructure. I'm sure there's a lot of people who ride on Woodfield. I don't know if they choose to take the sidewalk or they're out in the street, but it is it's a bit of a dangerous road, I would say, Woodfield, because of mainly because of the speed of the cars. Next.
And it's absolutely flat, so it's easy to navigate if you're biking or walking.
Yes, it is easy.
This is
Lowell?
interesting. Yeah, I'd like to discuss this. Do you feel safe walking in your neighborhood? We were just talking about pedestrians and the fact that they do have the right of way, but nonetheless, they still have to be very conscious of and knowledgeable of where they are going and what they're doing. Too frequently, we tend to put blame on motorists for bad behavior, but sometimes pedestrians themselves. Cindy had mentioned about crossing mid-block as opposed to by crosswalks. These are important things that pedestrians have to keep in mind. And we asked the question, do you feel safe walking in your neighborhood? Obviously, the photo on the left would be an ideal situation. Everyone is in the crosswalk. You have a large crowd, which means people are visible. Now, unfortunately, again, depending on, Mark had mentioned about infrastructure. Depending on infrastructure, you may not have the benefit of curbs and sidewalks and crosswalks. And unfortunately, those two pedestrians, the lady with the walker and her dog, are not in the safest of situations. Obviously, there is no sidewalk. There's no way of telling where the road is and where a pedestrian would be. Obviously, she is staying on the side of the road, but it's a very dangerous situation for a pedestrian. One other thing I wanted to bring out was that she is going with the flow of traffic, meaning she is walking in the same direction the motorist is going in. We do not recommend that. Pedestrians should be trying their best. We mentioned before about eye contact. Well, pedestrians should be walking against traffic. In other words, the direction the traffic is going in, they should be facing the vehicles. The reason for that is we want the most opportunity available for eye contact to be made, for the pedestrian to be seen. That is the best way of going about doing it. So what this lady is doing is not the proper thing to be doing when you're walking. Try to do it against the traffic, not in the same direction as the traffic. Next, please. Okay, here again, talking about infrastructure. Ideally, we would like a situation where there are sidewalks, such as you see on the right. Common sense, this would be a safer location for pedestrians to traverse. Unfortunately, though, there are many communities, especially rural areas, many parts of Suffolk County, even parts of Nassau, where you're not going to have the luxury or the benefit of a sidewalk. These are areas, again, that we would put a lot of emphasis on as far as maintaining care and safety. In a situation like this, again, you would want to go in the direction that the traffic is approaching. You don't want to go with the flow of traffic if you're a pedestrian. One other thing that I would also recommend, depending on the weather conditions or the time of the day, it would be highly recommended to wear bright colored clothing, even if possible, a vest with light colors. If you don't have safety vest or some other safety reflective equipment, bright colors, especially, like I said, when there's inclement weather or when it's dark out. Next slide, please. Okay, a couple of recommendations for pedestrians. First of all, as you can see here, there is a crosswalk and there is a push button for pedestrians to use. Quite often, we find that pedestrians do not take advantage of these push buttons. You actually should, because in many instances, these push buttons, if you actually push them, they will provide additional time for pedestrians to cross the street. So let's go through a few of these items. Make sure to push the button to get the walk icon on. Like I said, that could often provide you with additional precious few seconds to cross the street. Once the walk icon comes on, you may now cross the street. Be sure to watch for turning vehicles, of course. More common sense. Sometimes, though, people not even thinking about this. Be aware that trucks and buses cannot always see a pedestrian who is close to them. Try to signal the driver of this type of vehicle that you are crossing in front of them. Quite often we find pedestrians that are getting knocked down by large vehicles. The assumption is, well, I'm crossing the street and there's this big vehicle or big truck. They must see me. They have the high ground. They have the height. It's not the case always. If you're close to their vehicle, their side of view may not include you. You may think that you're being observed by the operator of the vehicle. That's not always the case. So even though you do have a right of way, the burden falls on the individual pedestrian to make sure that the operators of the vehicles, especially those big buses and those big tractor trailers, that they are aware that you are there. So make sure, do your best to make eye contact. You can throw a hand up in the air just to wave. Make sure that they are aware that you are there. Finally, if you walk slowly or if you require the use of a cane or a walker, always wait for a fresh green light, or green signal rather, before crossing. Do not try and take it when that countdown is near an end, because if you walk slowly, you're risking being caught in a red light for yourself, green light for the traffic. You don't want to be in a situation like that. Next, please. Okay, a couple of other items of importance. Other roadway designs and devices that can make it easier and safer for you to cross the street. These are engineering items. Some of them are very simple. Others a little bit more complex, but they are all out there as part of infrastructure projects. That's a big term that we hear a lot of these days, especially with Washington, D.C. promoting the idea of spending money to improve the roadways. Well, hopefully some of these items will be included. The first one we have here is road dieting or road diets to reduce vehicle speeds and the number of lanes pedestrians cross. That would reduce the amount of actual lanes that are motor vehicle active. A couple of other important items, pedestrian refuge islands. Those I'm sure you're familiar with on some of the larger roadways here in Long Island. They give the pedestrians an opportunity to stop, especially if you have issues walking fast or if you need to take a break. It gives them an opportunity to relax, to rest, and then when the light turns green in their favor again, if they get a walk signal, they can continue to go across that roadway. Raised crosswalks, that can help reduce vehicle speed. Very important if you're near a crosswalk. Sometimes you'll see these raised, these bumps in the road. More modern crosswalks usually have those conveniences. They help to notify the vehicle operator that, hey, you got to slow down here. It's important because you're at a crosswalk. Sometimes, unfortunately, too many vehicle operators, just like pedestrians quite often, are distracted. I hate to use the C word, cell phone, but we all know that pedestrians as well as vehicle operators too often are busy on the cell phone. Unfortunately, we do need to have items like these raised crosswalks to help keep people aware of their surroundings. Crosswalk visibility enhancements such as crosswalk lighting and enhanced signs, common sense items. And finally, leading pedestrian intervals or LPIs at signalized intersections. That's what I was mentioning before regarding the push button. Quite often, many of the push buttons are LPI tied, meaning that once you press that button and you get the walk sign, it's going to provide you with an extra few seconds for the countdown. And again, if you're a slow walker, if you have some type of challenges to walking, these devices are a godsend. They will provide you with that extra time to cross the street. But please, regardless, always make sure of your surroundings. Put the phone away as you're crossing an intersection, at the crosswalk. Make sure the drivers see you and you see them.
And well, I would mention with this slide, these engineering efforts are very widely used in the boroughs, and because of people living in that area, you're close to Queens, so maybe you drive into Queens and there's, less lanes, or there's these things called bump outs, and like you're not used to it. We're not quite as used to a lot of these things in Nassau County as you would be in the boroughs. I would say it's starting a little bit more now in Nassau County. Some of the newer construction, road construction, you might see this. It was in Floral Park yesterday with one of the colleagues. We saw a flashing beacon. When a pedestrian goes in a crosswalk, they have the right of the way. Cars have to stop, but they don't always stop. But here in Floral Park, you press this, so when you enter the crosswalk, then all these flashing lights come on to try to make sure that the drivers know you got to stop for this pedestrian. So I think we will see more of these in Nassau County, and generally they're helpful.
And hopefully in Suffolk as well. Like I said, with more emphasis these days on capital projects that focus on infrastructure improvements, hopefully many of these funds will trickle down to the local communities, and you will find an expansion of these types of designs and devices proliferating, hopefully. Okay, next, please.
Okay, so let me go over some bike laws, and I'm only really going over a few because, first of all, I'd say New York State has vehicle and traffic law, and that book is about this thick. About I don't know, a third, or I don't really know, but there's a lot of laws relating to bikes. Most of us have driver's license. We had to get a driver's license. We had to learn some laws, but you don't have to get a license when you're a cyclist. But there are a lot of laws. And I would say one of the first things, just to think, it's helpful to think of your bike as a vehicle. It's a non-motorized vehicle, at least most of them are, but so the same way we follow laws when we're driving, we got to follow laws when we're biking. So first of all, cyclists, we have to follow the same laws for motorists. So these little pictures here are showing you a cyclist stopping at a stop sign, stopping at the red light yield. Does it always happen? I don't think so. But the law says you are supposed to stop just like a car, would do. The second one, I think we've kind of touched on this, but it's important that for cyclists have a right to be on the road. Roads are not just for cars. They are for cars. They're for cyclists and all different type of cyclists. They're for pedestrians, all type of pedestrians, people in wheelchairs. So you have the right to be on the road. Just like Cindy mentioned, you can't be riding your bike on the highway. It's against the law, and it's a bit silly. And I've actually seen it on the Meadowbrook. I've seen people cycling, but it's an important mindset that, we're all pedestrians at times, and if you ride your bike, we do have rights. Now, this is important, the third bullet. When you're riding your bike, and as adults, generally you're riding out in the street, you ride with traffic. You go the same way the car goes. That's different. We're kind of drilling that with pedestrians. They would face the car, but we ride the same way that cars do. We're coming up to the stop sign, on the same side. And that's because I think drivers are going to be more likely to be aware of the cyclists on the right. They're gonna, it's more of a flow issue. It's traffic, and these vehicles, all vehicles are flowing the same way. Next bullet, New York state law says children under the age of 14 and over the age of 1, by law, have to wear a bike helmet. If you're a parent, you would pay the summons. I believe it's a $50 summons if a police officer takes your child for not wearing the helmet. But if some of you might remember, about a year ago, it's probably right about a year ago, that the Nassau County Legislature, localities can make their own laws, and Nassau upped it to age 18, under the age of age 18. So that's different than Suffolk County. We have a new law now in Nassau County related to that. I would just say most good cyclists, that doesn't mean that adults shouldn't wear helmets. You don't have to by law, but bike helmets are very, very effective at, preventing brain injury. I don't think anybody wants to get a brain injury. Next slide, please. Okay, a few things, and these are laws. If you think of the bike itself, you have to have by law, and generally when you buy a bike, you're going to have these things on the bike. These are minor things, but they're important. That you have a white reflector in the front and a red reflector in the back. If you don't, go buy reflectors, go to Limbrick Bikes. I like that guy there. They're real cheap. But also just think for a second, it's white in the front, like headlights of a car. It's red in the back, like brake lights. It's a similar design. And you also have, usually you have reflectors on your pedals. They're very helpful at night because car lights tend to go down. So the car lights might see that pedal reflector. And then the reflector in your spoke is very helpful also at night, possibly because you're perpendicular. If a car is going this way and the bike comes this way, they see those spoke reflectors, and the spoke reflectors are moving. You're going with the wheels. So they're seen. Make sure you have the reflectors. Actually, I'll jump to the third bullet. Let's say that is along the same lines. At nighttime, a little bit before dark, just like cars, a little, in the morning, if you're riding before it gets dark, at night, you have to have a light. It's different. It's a white light in the front. It's a red light in the back. It's funny. We do a lot of bike education among kids, and they think a reflector is a light, but you have to have, and I would tell you, like my colleagues here, drive around at night. When there's a cyclist out at night and they don't have lights on their bike, and some of them don't even have reflectors, like, I feel like I'm a good driver, but how do I even see the person? Like Lo was talking about visibility, if they're wearing dark clothes, if there's no reflectors. And actually, if you see those, guys riding around their Italian bike suits, good bicyclists now, just like I put my lights on during the day when I drive my car. It's a little extra visibility, and a lot of cyclists, adult cyclists, they even put their lights on during the day now. It's extra visibility. You can ride 2 abreast on the roadway. I'd say the main time you see that, not like on a Sunday morning when the bike clubs are out, they'll take over the whole lane, 5 of them, but that's against the law. It's only 2. If a car is passing you, they have to use due care, give you space, but then you should, if you are riding together with a friend and you see cars, you should try to get into a single file then. And this is a little known law that you have to have a bell or horn on your bike. I don't know of anybody who gets a summons for it, but I actually think that the point would be communication. When we're driving, if somebody cuts us off, we blow our horn. It's a way to communicate with other road users. You can also yell when you're on your bicycle, but by law, you should have a bell or a horn. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about helmets. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to take my glasses off. I'm going to try to show you my helmet here, if you see. So first of all, there are mainly two types of helmets. This is a bicycle helmet, but there are some helmets, they're usually black, and they have more plastic in the back. They're called multi-sport helmets. And we kind of recommend those usually for young, kids if they're on their scooters or on skateboards, because when you're on a scooter or skateboard, you tend to fall backwards. So that gives you a little extra protection in the back. You can use a bike helmet, but a lot of actually boys especially like the multi-sport helmet. Actually, and I should make that point that the helmet law is for scooters, skateboards, roller skates. You have to wear a helmet, between the ages of 1 and 17 for Nassau County. So I have an adjustable helmet here, and I got a big head. So you see, just to show you, I don't know how, if you're wearing a helmet up like that, it's not too good. It's not going to help you too much. So I adjust my helmet all the way. And you see the pictures on the top. So when it gets bigger, you see I'm now protecting the forehead a little bit. One of the things we tell children generally, but when you have it down and you see how it's parallel, you get usually about 2 fingers from your eyebrows to the bottom of the helmet. When it was up there, I could get 4 or 5 fingers. So it's got to come down. There's 3 basic things. On the side, there's a plastic tab here. It goes up and down. That should be, you slide that up so it's at the bottom of your ears. The 2, it forms like a V, like a lot of people have them down here. So you slide those up, bottom of your ears, and then when you clip, you want to get about 1 finger between the strap and your chin. And then the helmet's pretty snug. You can also see when I move around like this, it's not flailing, which a lot of people, they wear their helmets too loose. I think more adults ride, like this. They don't even clip it. I don't see the benefit of that, because the helmet could just be come off. If you do happen to fall, crack the helmets, replace it. There's a visible crack. And most of the time in a helmet, you're not going to see, there's little stickers in here. You can see how old your helmet is. I took a friend out, this guy with cerebral palsy, biking last week. And, I looked in his helmet. I had to readjust it for him, but his helmet was 10 years old. I said, go get a new helmet. They're not that expensive. And my recommendation, if you need a helmet for yourself, you're going to get, go wherever you want to go. But if you go to a bike store, they'll fit it for you and make sure that you're wearing a helmet. So use a helmet, make sure it fits correctly. One last point with helmets and children is, in our experience, working with a lot of children, we see a lot of 10-year-olds, around that age, who have pretty small helmets. It's probably the first helmet that their parent bought them, and maybe it's not adjustable, and their heads are growing, and they need a new helmet. So if you have children, check that their helmets fit them correctly. Next.
What we have here is 2 different types of dedicated bike lanes. Quite often you will find cyclists on the road where there are no bike lanes whatsoever. Sometimes you might have signage that says bike route, which means this is the area that is recommended for cyclists to utilize, but that does not necessarily mean that they have dedicated lanes. In this instance over here, you do have 2 dedicated lanes. The one on the left, which unfortunately is being blocked by a vehicle, is a bike lane specifically for cyclists to utilize. Again, as Mark has already mentioned, cyclists will go with the flow of traffic, meaning that you go in the same direction as the motorists will be going, unlike pedestrians who will be facing traffic. Now, ideally, and again, you have this vehicle that's blocking that bike lane, but ideally, if you have a dedicated bike lane in a safety location, such as you do on Route 347 in Suffolk County, that photograph on the upper right, that's great, because now you have the luxury of cyclists who have no contact directly with motorists. That's unique, though. It's a little unfortunate we don't have that many locations where there are dedicated bike lanes that are independent of the roadways. Which brings up another issue in Suffolk County. Hasn't happened in Nassau yet, but in Suffolk County, there is a legislative law that went into effect. You must, if you're a motorist, stay 3 feet away from cyclists. It's a bit of a controversial issue because some motorists feel that they have the right to the road. Unfortunately for them and their perspective, that's not the case. They do have a right, but so do cyclists, and they have to respect the right of cyclists. So ideally, you would not see a situation like you do in that photograph on the left.
You know, one other bike, well, there's bike trails also. And I just mentioned that because one of the places, you know, by your library in Hempstead Lake State Park, you got a really nice bike trail there. You know, you don't have to worry at all about cars. It's a fairly level one. I'm not sure the full distance, but I used to ride that a lot. You know, you kind of come back and you're riding and see the lake on the side. But that's a great place to ride and not have to worry about cars at all. You know, Nassau County actually has some nice bike trails. Bethpage State Park, they just completed the Ocean Parkway, which is sort of between Jones Beach and Captree. It's really nice. It's level. You know, you're off-road, no cars, and it's on the bay side. You get this beautiful view of the bay. So from exercise point of views, you know, you're not riding in traffic so much here, but we do have some nice bike trails.
And 347, not to knock the beauty of 347, but that would be an ideal location for the many bicycle commuters that we have, those who use the bicycle as their main means of transportation to and from school, places of work, business. And, you know, that trails, of course, are great, but they don't necessarily, Ocean Parkway maybe is an exception, but they don't necessarily, they may be more focused towards bicycle usage for leisure and for sporting.
Mm-hmm.
This is not so much for bread and butter issues, commuting to work and school, etc. 347, you know, unfortunately, we don't have enough 347s out there yet.
Right.
Next slide, please. Speaking of the 3-foot rule that we just discussed in Suffolk County, as you see here on the left, you have cyclist who's going with the flow of traffic, but that cyclist has a couple of issues to deal with. Primarily, that vehicle that's parked there, it may not be parked legally, we're not sure, but obviously the cyclist will have to weave into the flow of traffic. It's important that he remain alert, as well as the vehicle operators, to the idea of a cyclist at a very short moment, all of a sudden swerving. That happens because of situations like the one on the left, and because of the one on the right, where somebody who wasn't paying attention, I guess, who was in the motor vehicle, looks like the motorist in this case, decided to swing their door open, nearly knocking down the cyclist. Cyclist obviously is going to swerve out of the way. Quite often, motorists get annoyed, perturbed with cyclists because they see them swerving. Again, we don't know the reason why they may be swerving. It could be because there is a door about to hit them. It could be because they have potholes that they're dealing with, just like drivers are. So there are various reasons why you may see a cyclist all of a sudden swerve into oncoming traffic. Be leery of that. Both cyclists need to be, as well as motor vehicle operators.
Here's a great tip for drivers. When you're opening up your door, when you're the driver, I believe this is called the Dutch reach. You know, we tend to park and we open up the door with our left hand and we're not looking. When you park your car, take your right hand and open up your door with the right hand, because what you're doing, that's forcing you to move, and then you will see a cyclist or a pedestrian in your peripheral vision, or you'll see them in your side view mirror. So I don't know if you remember, but take your right hand, open up your door that way, and you're less likely. This guy on the left, it's hard to say if there's a driver on it. That driver opens up the door, that guy's in trouble.
He's going to have a big problem.
He's going to be doored, you know. You got to go really slow when you're passing cars like he is, and you got to look in there to see, is there somebody sitting there, and you got to assume, you should assume that they're going to open up their door.
And unfortunately, he was not wearing his helmet, but again, in New York State, he looked like he was over the age of 14, so he
Probably.
A little.
a little over 14.
All right, just to kind of give you an update, there are new devices on the road that you are probably seeing more and more of every day, known as micro-mobility devices, and they consist of pedal assist bikes, scooters, smaller motorized scooters that you can sit on, most of which are electric, so they don't make any noise. Many cities now, or villages even, or outside of train stations, are starting to make these types of vehicles available as rentals, much like City Bike in Manhattan is. And for a very small fee, if you live a mile or two from a train station, they're extremely convenient to ride to your point of main transportation. And they can be left there, they'll be picked up. My concern is that there is very little legislation that actually covers these types of vehicles. And so you may find them on the sidewalk, you may find them in the street. You could find them almost any place. Some go up to 30 miles an hour. They definitely don't belong on a sidewalk. And when the city passed a law, not the city, when New York State passed a law about a year ago, legalizing these types of vehicles, there were very few other specifics identified in the law. So until that happens, they don't have to be registered, they don't have to be licensed. So I just want you to be aware that they're coming, and that to really look out for them. Again, as I said, there are some that are gasoline powered, but most are electric, run on batteries, and they don't make any noise. So it is very dangerous for a pedestrian or somebody on foot crossing a street or whatever who doesn't see or hear this coming. So it's a problem.
30 miles an hour is the typical.
Fast. The speed limit in New York City is 25. So,
Yeah.
Okay, next. These are just some additional safety hints for pedestrians. You should always walk on a sidewalk as long as there is one. When there is no sidewalk, you always walk facing traffic. You cross streets at corners or crosswalks. You want to be safe and be seen, so you wear a brightly colored item of clothing or a safety vest, as you see here. You should never text or talk on your cell phone when you're attempting to cross the street, because most people who are doing that are looking at their phone and they are not looking at anything else, and they're oblivious to traffic. When you are walking or even bicycling at night, again, wear reflective garments, apply reflective stickers. You can put them on your person. They're available in ties that go on backpacks, on ties that go on sneakers, there's all types of reflective materials, and many helmets come now with lights on the back of them that flash. And there are flashing lights that are on the back of bicycles, and it really, really does help if you're riding at night. And the only other thing I would say is that if you're going to be walking at night and you're unsure of where you're walking, or if the sidewalks are busted up, you might want to carry, or even use your cell phone, the light on your cell phone to carry, just to light your way as you're going on. Mark?
Okay, next. So a few, more tips on bicyclists to show you a few laws. I would say, I think one of the one major tip I would give you is to be a consistent bike rider. Too many people, they speed up, they slow down, they swerve. You know, ride at a steady speed so the driver can make an assessment of what your skills are. When I'm driving and I see a guy, you know, thin guy wearing an Italian bike suit, and he's got this really nice bike, I have a sense this guy can go fast. He knows what he's doing. He's probably going to be an aggressive bike rider. If I see a child, I slow down even more because they're not so good as the bike riders. So, you know, be consistent as a bike driver. And I think with everything that we're talking about, we said this a number of times, just the idea of communicating with the other road users. I'll give you one little tip I use, and I don't ride in traffic too much, my bicycle, but if I'm cycling, I'm staying over to the right as much as I can, and I hear a car coming, you know, I will, if I'm looking forward, I hear a car in the back, I just look over my shoulder. I don't look back to see the car necessarily. I just look. That tells the driver, I know you're there. Maybe I'm going to move over to the right a little bit more. You know, they're less worried now because they realize that they're not going to think I'm going to swerve. I'm not going to swerve because I know there's a car. So be a consistent bike rider. Lowell talked about turns. Let me just say, for drivers, and this affects all of us, the most dangerous move that drivers make is the left turn. We make aggressive left turns when we're driving. We're speeding, you know, we're going too soon, so we're worried that other car's going to hit us. We're not squaring off. So, you know, be very conscious of cars making left turns if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist. Some of the other things are actually laws here. That last bullet, you can only have, just like a driver, one earbud in it. You know, a lot of people have two. How can you be, how aware are you if you're listening to your music and you know, you don't even have one ear free? Kids will, you know, nobody should be riding on your handlebars, or, you know, that's against the law. If the bicycle, for one, only one person by law, you know, can be on the bike. I mean, it's a law, but it's common sense too. And don't, you know, kids will grab a truck, or, you know, the Good Humor, I probably did it as a kid. You grab the back of the Good Humor truck, you know, and you let them take you. Then he stops short, you're in trouble. Kind of common sense, but just, you know the laws. We've given you some laws, and just be a conscious, I'd say, bike rider when you're out there. Next.
All right, well, during a live presentation, we would typically take questions, but that doesn't mean you can't submit your questions to us. So firstly, thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to Lakeview Library for hosting us. And thank you to all of our attendees who tuned in. If you do have questions, or if you'd like any further information, you can reach out to Cindy Brown directly at the New York Coalition for Transportation Safety, or you can submit questions or reach out to me here at the Collaborative. And we also just have some additional resources for you. Of course, the Walk Safe Long Island website, you can find some of those laws that were discussed today, as well as upcoming programs like this one. The New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Committee website, the Department of Transportation has a lot of good info about biking in New York, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration website is a good resource. So thank you.